Rudolf Steiner, the 7 steps of what he calls Christian initiation. In other lectures, I have often described the initial steps by which we rise to the vision of the Christ being himself. The people must live over again all the steps described in the Gospel of St. John. Only the very briefest description can now be given of the manner in which the human being, when he resolves to live through a certain scale of feelings, can rise into the spiritual world which has been illuminated by the light of Christ since the crucifixion. The pupil begins by saying to himself, "I consider the plant. It flourishes and grows out of the mineral soil. But if the plant could be conscious, like man, it should bend to the mineral kingdom, to the soil out of which it has grown, and say, 'Thou stone art today a lower creation among the works of nature than I. But without thee, lower kingdom, I could not subsist.' And likewise, if the animal were to approach the plant and feel that the plant is the support of its existence, it would reflect, 'As an animal, I am a higher being than thou, O plant, but without thee I could not exist.' And the animal would bow down with humility and say, 'To thee, lowly plant, which art humbler than I owe my existence.' And in the human kingdom too, it should be likewise. Everyone who has climbed higher on the ladder should bow down in a spiritual sense to the one below him, saying, 'Ye belong indeed to an inferior world, but as the plant must bend to the stone, and the animal to the plant, so must man at a higher stage add, To thee who art humbler than I owe my existence.' Then, when the pupil has so steeped himself in the feeling of a universal humility, for weeks and months, perhaps for years, under the guidance of a teacher fitted for the task, there comes a moment for him in which he knows what is meant by the washing of the feet. For he has a direct spiritual vision of the act accomplished by Christ as he, a higher being, bent before the 12 and did wash their feet. And the whole significance of the act flashes on the pupil as a vision, and he knows that the washing of the feet did take place. The bond of knowledge guides him so that he needs no further proof. He now gazes directly into the spiritual world and beholds Christ in the scene of the washing of the feet. The pupil can then be led by the teacher so that he can find strength to say, "I will bear all the sorrows and sufferings that may come to me in the world, courageously and without murmuring. I will so steel myself against the pains and sorrows that they cease to be such for me, and I can realize that they are necessities in the world." When the pupil has become sufficiently strong of soul, there grows up within him, out of that inner contemplation, the feeling of the scourging. He experiences it spiritually in himself. The pupil is then instructed how to develop that force which belongs to a still higher stage, and which enables him not only to endure sorrow and suffering on the every hand, but also to say to himself, "There is something so sacred to me that I am ready to give my very self for it. Should the whole world cover me with scorn and derision, this will still be the holiest for me. Mockery and ridicule from all sides will not withhold me from the holiest, even though I stand alone. I pledge myself to defend it." The pupil then experiences inwardly, in the spirit, the crowning with thorns. He needs no historical records. His spiritual vision shows him the scene described in the Gospel of St. John as the crowning with thorns. Then, when the pupil learns under suitable guidance to regard his physical existence in a totally new light, then he learns to look upon his own body as something external, to be carried about with him. When this feeling and sensation have become so much a matter of course that he can say, "I bear my physical body through the world like an outer instrument," he has reached the 4th stage of Christian initiation, the bearing of the cross. This does not make him a feeble ascetic. On the contrary, he learns to handle the instrument of his body much more effectually than before. When we learn to regard the body as something which we carry about with us, we have attained the fourth stage of Christian initiation, the bearing of the cross. Then we have conquered for ourselves the power to behold in the Spirit the scene in which Christ bears the cross upon his back, as we have learnt, by the elevation of our soul, to carry our body like a piece of wood. Something then takes place which we must regard as the fifth stage of Christian initiation, what is called the mystic death. By our inner growth, everything around us, the whole physical world of sense, appears as if blotted out. Darkness compasses us about. Then comes a moment when the darkness is, as it were, rent asunder like a veil, and we see behind this physical world. While this moment lasts, something else takes place. We have learnt to know what sin and evil are. We recognize them in their true form. That is, we know at this stage what is meant by the descent into hell. Then we learn, while looking upon our body as something foreign to us, to regard everything else upon earth as a part of ourselves, to the extent that our body is a part of ourselves, even as in the days of old clairvoyance. We learn to look upon the sufferings of others as those of a great organism to which we too belong, and we are united with the earth inasmuch as we recognize the truth. We then have the experience of being laid in the earth, the burial. And being united with the earth, we have also risen from it. For in this experience we have tasted what is meant by the words, "The earth is in process of becoming a new sun." In these fourth, fifth, and sixth stages of Christian initiation, we have attained the qualities enabling us to behold, in personal vision, the event of Golgotha, and to live in intimate knowledge of it. We have now no need of traditional documents. These have served their purpose in leading us from step to step. We have then reached the seventh stage, called the Ascension. In other words, the ascent into the spiritual world. This is the stage of which it is rightly claimed that no human language is capable of describing it. For no idea of it can be formed save by one who has learned to think without the instrument of the brain. The miracle of the Ascension cannot become the object of thought save when the thinker has learnt to dispense with the physical brain as the instrument of thought. Being capable of spiritual vision, they who were present as believers at the crucifixion on Golgotha were in a position to see what was happening. They would have been able to see the Christ in the manner described to you, especially if he had revealed himself to their open spiritual eye in the aura of the earth. They might have seen the Christ, even had he retained the same form to a certain extent which he had worn before, were it not that he, the Christ, had won something for himself by his conquest of death.